use the chat box. If you have questions, you can use the chat box to ask a question. We ask that everyone stays on mute if you have a lot of background noise. We're gonna just have a conversation, and we will be addressing questions in the chat box, and at the end, we will open it up for question and answer. We will stop spotlighting Kate so she could see who's on the call and who's with us today. So there we go. So where are you, Kate?
So right now I'm upstate. I'm from New York. Like my studio is in Manhattan, but my mom has a large property upstate. So almost a month ago we came up here. Actually, I was sick and my husband was sick, and we stayed indoors for about a month, and then decided once it was safe for us to come up here, because I have a huge studio space that I usually come and work at during the summers. So we were able to come up here, and I could get started working again, and we could go outside a little bit, which has been really incredible for me. So I'm in upstate New York in my large barn studio, just about 3 hours northwest of the city, not too far from Albany.
Wonderful. I'm so glad you have that space to escape to. I know there are a lot of people on this call that know myself and Kate, but I first met Kate through Rush Galleries when she was a painter. And now she's very much known for these large-scale collages and has gotten quite a bit of recognition about them. Can you tell us about that transition?
Yeah, sure. Well, first, I thought we should say that I grew up in Queens and then moved to New Rochelle in high school, and then that's when I went to the Pelham Art Center, which is a weird connection because my connection to Charlotte isn't from that at all, but she just ended up at the Pelham Art Center without even knowing I had a connection there, I think, right, Charlotte?
That's right.
Yeah, so I started, I've been painting for quite some time. Went to undergraduate school and did printmaking at Binghamton, and then went to Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts in Philly, where I was transitioning away from printmaking and doing more painting and very figurative works. And I stuck to the figure for a long time. When I met Charlotte, I was painting a series of students that I had been teaching. I was a visiting artist for a long time in Brooklyn. So just telling the stories of these young people that I've been working with. So I was doing these, it's somewhat large, 4x6 figurative paintings when I met Charlotte. But I think the figurative stuff started because I took figure drawing at Pelham Art Center in high school. And then just kind of felt like the figure was the most direct way of talking about life and talking about, of telling a story was by literally using the human body. So my painting stuck with the figure up until I guess when my grandparents died, and I found all these old family photographs, and I didn't want them to stay in storage, so I started photocopying them. And at the time I was going to do a residency in Switzerland, so I took these photocopies of these old family photos with me to Switzerland and started building these family portraits from these photographs. And that started the collage transition, but still holding on to the figure. So I did I think about 100 portraits using old family photos, these photocopies of old family photos. And then I came back and showed them in New York, and then someone asked me to do a piece about gentrification. Do you remember that show, Charlotte?
The gentrification show? Or I was seeing the small portraits. You said you just did 100 of them, but can you give the scale?
They were 20 by 30 probably. And I showed a lot of them in this I did a pop-up show in this piano shop in Midtown, which was really amazing. They were just kind of installed all over this huge loft space in the city. Yeah, so that was called the Legacy Project. I wanted to archive my grandparents' stories. They were working class, from Queens, and I felt I was questioning a lot about what happens to someone's story after they die. You know, and with art, it lasts forever, right? So if I could show like all the lives that my grandparents touched, you know, through these portraits, their story would live on forever. You know, so if you look closely at the portraits, you see some writing also of my grandparents, and then just old family photos. The kind that usually like either get passed on in family albums or put into books or something, but I turn them into much more contemporary portraits. It's kind of abstracted, I would say. I've never really been a realist, or they've always been somewhat abstracted interpretations of things. So yeah, so that started the collage. And then the gentrification show, which led to this current series, was a show at Brush also, Charlotte. I forget the name of the organization, but an organization partnered, and I was asked to like create a piece for the show having to do with the gentrification of New York. We actually have that piece in the slideshow if you want to put up some slides, if you think it's a good time to see some other images.
Sure.
There's a piece, the piece was called Bed-Stuy. At the time I was living in Brooklyn and just kind of walking around and watching Bed-Stuy change. And so I started taking pictures of everything, of like these old buildings, these new constructions, these like the garbage I would see on the street, the things that like kind of made New York, while it was also transitioning into this sort of higher end place. And that started my series, which I'm still working on, called A Love Letter to My City, which seems unusually relevant at the moment, dealing with like the state of our city and our country. Charlotte, can you make that slide bigger? I see just a lot of different tabs.
Oh, I'm sorry, hold on. I'm sorry, everyone.
So I started photographing everywhere I went. I just used my iPhone and walked around the city and like took pictures of things. Like I don't consider myself a photographer, but I am like more of a storyteller, like looking, you know, and connected to also like with what I was trying to do with the portraits of my grandparents and my family. Like, how do we hold on to something that is forever fleeting, right? So how do I hold on to my grandparents' story? How do I hold on to the story of my city? You know, like, because the city I remember as a kid isn't the same city that I started photographing a few years ago, and now the city still isn't is like even different from then. So these here are collages from my exhibit I had at Binghamton. They're made up of probably hundreds of layers of photographs that I've taken. All of them taken in the 5 boroughs of New York, and then I print them large scale and build these collages. Charlotte, if you could flip through, there's one particular that's the first one. If you go fast enough, you can go back and look at these. That one right there, if you can hold. So this is the first large scale collage that I did that was based on, you know, that started from being asked to do something about the gentrification of New York. It's hard to see because you can't really tell the scale of it. It's about 10 by 10 feet. So all the parts are, you know, are just made up of these little photos. If you look closely at your screen, you'll see this theater in Bed-Stuy that's now gone. It was called the Slave Theater. It had been up for a really, really long time, and then like somehow finally like they couldn't get historic landmark status, so it got torn down last year. And there's like different parts. I mean, I'm interested in holding on to the memory of things, and also at the same time noticing and finding the beauty in objects that you know, we wouldn't normally find beautiful. We can keep looking through the slides so people can get an idea.
What year was this, Kate, that these large scale collages started happening?
They started in I think it was 2016. And oh, I kind of skipped a series though, Charlotte, right? So in between the portrait series and the gentrification and the love letter to my city is what we're looking at now. I archived my grandparents' home and photographed everything in it. Sorry for jumping around there. So in between the smaller portraits and the large startup cityscapes are these interiors. So as we were selling my grandparents' home, I took pictures of almost every object in the house and blew them up. So this is also, these are 8 by 12 feet. So I reconstructed, this is the part of the dining room. The last one was also part of the dining room. This is the kitchen. And they incorporated objects from my grandparents' actual house. And yeah, so you can see they're abstracted, but they also hold some sort of sense of photorealism. And these ones I was really still holding on to the painting elements a lot more than I am now. I do paint a little bit now into the collages, but these were more being like more, I would say like more painted to truer to life. Yeah, you can switch them, Charlotte. There's another kitchen one, and you can see like play with the scale and like have sort of fun.
You mentioned, Kate, about the real objects, but wasn't there things like a towel bar with an actual towel on one of these? And
so when they were hanging, when they were installed, they had like the telephone. I think that's all we might have from that series, Charlotte. So we can hold on there for a second, maybe. But yeah, there was actual like I put in actual towels. From actual kitchen towels were in the kitchen, and objects that were on the table at my grandparents' house. We installed the telephone for the exhibit. My grandparents had a really old rotary phone that I think was common in a lot of people's houses. Yeah, and I built a rug out of different parts. And so there's also this, it's my grandparents' house, but I found like there was actually the last newspaper, I think it might be the last newspaper that was delivered to my grandfather's house. I put that in there. Yeah, just different objects of theirs. So it became like more of a three-dimensional space in a way. I found it really connected more universally to people. Like I didn't realize how many people's homes looked like my grandparents. So when I show the work, there's this like connection between people where they would share their memories of their home or their grandparents' home or something. They're like, oh my God, my grandfather had this or my grandmother had that. So there's also that element to my work where I really want to be able to connect and interact with people. And to like the storytelling itself. Now we can look at the bigger, and then after telling their story, that's where I transitioned into telling this like bigger story of New York. So kind of still holding on to the personal, but kind of trying to find bigger, like larger stories for people to connect to. So I play with abstraction and realism. As you can see, this one's more of an abstract piece, but it starts with the tunnel building. That's the center. It's a building in Manhattan, and then all the rest are these torn up buildings, and all of them are 8 by 12 feet, so they're really large. And this one is like a more recent one. I got really interested in construction sites. And different parts of the physical changing of the city that you can see. This is the post. You can see, probably see, like, this is the post office on 34th Street. There's always a sense of nostalgia, I think, in the storytelling for a New York that I remember. But somehow I keep thinking, like, I can't help but think about, like, sort of this nostalgia for a few months ago now, which is coming up, I think, in the newer pieces that I'm working on up here as I'm a little bit away from the city and thinking about what's going on. You know, these pieces were created out of this, like, oh, the city is becoming so wealthy and unaffordable, you know, and how do I hold on to this New York that I felt was for everyone before? And somehow I feel like we're returning to this, like, nostalgic imagery that comes up in my work. I created this piece actually at City Hall when I went to get my marriage license. It's all, like, made up of different parts of City Hall. And I would just take, like, I think I have like 50,000 images on my phone, and it's because I don't stop taking photographs wherever I go. I definitely have an obsession with never not forgetting, you know, and also that, like, the story is bigger than me, if that makes sense, that I want to capture an understanding for what it means to be human. And now also, like, having a daughter, the work also has more, you know, expanded meaning. Like, what do I want to share with her and with the world? And I started to bring in elements of, like, combining different boroughs together. So you'll see images of Brooklyn and images of Manhattan. My studio was in Brooklyn for a long time. I lived in Brooklyn right after graduate school and stayed there up until, like, I moved out of Brooklyn like 3 years ago, but my studio left Brooklyn about 2 years ago.
And bring it back to you in your space.
Yeah. Do you guys want to see what I'm working on now?
Absolutely. We'd love to. That's why we're here.
Okay. Awesome. I'm going to switch the camera, and my brother is going to take over so that we can see this stuff. I'll kind of walk. How are we doing? Yeah, if you have any questions, Charlotte, let me know. So these two pieces, I started the last time I was up here, which was a few months ago, but I've been working on completing them. And then the rest of the work has been since I've been up here. And I kind of wanted to show a little bit of scale, because I do work mostly large these days, but I've been doing smaller stuff, like for different shows or for open calls, or for now there's a US Post Office project that I'm doing with Charlotte and with a bunch of other people, where we're mailing art and collaborating with other artists and sharing it. So I do smaller works for different things. Also because most of the time we don't have this large space to create in. So you can see, like, these are smaller scale or medium-sized scale, the large pieces you're looking at now. And then there's smaller scales that I do, you know, kind of as sketches, but they also end up being used for stuff. And like this here is a bodega that had gotten a car drove through. I think it was like a couple of months ago, but now the images are connecting to what's happening now with all the closures of stores. And so when I came back up and this piece wasn't finished, I started to work on it, and then with a different thought pattern to it, more dealing with the closure of stores and restaurants and businesses in New York. And because I'm up here and it's kind of challenging to get new prints, I took a bunch of photos of the city before I left. So I have these images I want to work with, having to do with, like, just the emptiness of the city. But because printing has become a little bit of a challenge, I don't do my own printing. I've been using these old photographs that I you know, took over the course of the last year. So sort of repurposing them to find a different meaning. I photographed a bunch of the marches that I had gone to, which like when you're thinking about the isolation of what we're doing now, and then you look at these images of crowds of people in the street, like at the Women's March, it has a different feeling and different sense of I don't know, it makes you think differently about what's going on in the world, right? So how do I use these images of crowds that now all of a sudden bring up the questions of will we ever be in these kind of crowds again, and sort of, what do I do with these images? So I started bringing the figure a little bit into this, because probably having to do with the isolation that we're going through. But this takes an image of a child from a protest, and I'm also tearing up these images of crowds and sort of building a larger collage around it. And then behind us here, these are still works in progress, so they're a little bit hard to talk about, but I don't really, now all these images are sort of, like the love letter to my city message is a little bit different, you know, and I look at all these photographs that I took of places that might look really different, you know, when the COVID virus is all over. So I'm thinking a lot about our city, you know, about New York. So, and it's kind of an unusual twist to be in a very safe, kind of isolated place to have a studio, but be thinking about the city, you know, and to have all these images of this place that I know so well, but to be able to create in a safe place when I know that there's so much going on, like not that far from here. So this sort of shows the process and scale. Most of the slides you saw are this scale. And I used to just like collage layer, and I started to use a little bit of tape to be able to move like puzzle pieces apart. And this one is, I would say, probably the most abstract piece I've done. And the creation process for me is like super intuitive. As much as it's about the image, it's about the physicality and the relationship of the pieces to one another. And then of course like the overall image, but a lot of the building of this piece is super physical and very much based on instinct. I started with, maybe you guys know this, like abandoned church on 23rd Street. It just has looked this way for a long time, but started with that as a center and built out. And if you look close, there's the images of the skyline from Queens and Brooklyn, and like ambulances and tall constructions, and also parts of the different protests and the Statue of Liberty. Yeah, so all different elements of New York. And then this is another scale of work that I do, like that is a little bit more like, when I get conditioned, usually this is around the size I do, because it's the size people have space for. And then you can see, I don't know if you can see the floor, but I usually work a lot on the floor. You can see some of the images that I work from. That's actually a whole pile of images from Venice that I haven't used yet. I thought I was going to start doing a series about Venice, but that was a while ago. And I'll probably come back to them, but now it seems pretty New York focused. Yeah. Any questions?
I have a question about your process.
Yeah.
What are, like, when you start something on that scale, like what are you using as a back, and what kind of adhesives are you using? And
oh yeah, sure. So what was the first one? What am I using on the back?
yeah, like what's your backing?
Oh, yeah. So everything is on canvas. I use like a gessoed canvas so that you know, the canvas kind of is somewhat taut but not, and I just usually nail the canvas into the wall. So it's like a huge blank canvas when I start, and then like depending, like the one behind me, I started by taping. Like sometimes I'll just start by gluing, and I use a gloss medium to just glue everything. Sometimes I start by taping. So I'll use, like, you'll see little blue pieces of masking tape on some of them. Like this one here has a lot of blue masking tape because it's not adhered yet. And then I can play around with them, but sometimes I just want to glue. So I take, like, because it's also a sort of like painting, right? I take these big brushes, dip them in this like gloss medium, and like just throw the gloss everywhere and collage. So then if I do it that way, I end up creating a lot more layers, which then creates a lot more texture. So that's one method. Or if I tape, then it's a little bit of less of a layered process because I can move around the pieces until I find the right place. But I usually play with them for a really long time.
And speaking about how the painting, like we see less painting brush strokes in your final work now, is that?
Yeah.
It's much more black and white than adding those color elements?
You know, I think that color will come, like the first two pieces I showed are in the process of getting color. And some of them get more or less color. I think, like, for the feeling of nostalgia, the black and white has been really drawn. But often there'll be something that needs to be, like, that I want to highlight or hand paint in color. Like in the pieces over there, there's like a grocery, there's like a weird kind of fire thing, and it's painted, or like the liquor store sign is painted. So just like subtle things that you might not even notice are painted, because it's sort of fits into this like photographic way of seeing.
And throughout this, you've mentioned some of the protests that you've gone to, and you know, considering social political climates and activist artist, what do you think about all that? How would you define yourself as an activist artist, or?
You know, I think like it's always a part of me, like politics. Like I really, yeah, I think I've always wanted to be a more like socio-political activist artist, but my work always ends up being about the aesthetics. So I think that it's in the core, like, being of my work. You know, it doesn't separate from, your work doesn't really, or my work doesn't really separate from who I am as a person. So I think often it's about like injustices, so it's underlying in my work, but it's not like, I wouldn't put myself in the same category as a lot of artists who are very much more straightforward about like the politics. It's more in subtly, you know.
Definitely.
Yeah, I get caught up in the aesthetics too much, maybe.
We're getting a lot of questions about the photos and the printing. Where do you print the images? Are you going to photocopy places? Are you getting professional quality prints that you're ripping up?
Yeah.
You send it out to a printer? I think someone wants to know what printer you actually go to.
Yeah, sure. So I've been going to Village Copier and doing like engineering style prints. And they're usually like 24 by 36, around like that scale. But I don't do photographic prints. They're all on like a very lightweight paper. I did do them at Staples for a long time, but they stopped wanting to do them. And Village Copier is amazing, but they've been closed because of Corona. So I'm trying to find a new place to print them. That's not super expensive, because when you start to get to the scale, like the size that I use, it's really challenging to find an affordable place. And I found, you know, very affordable, like Village Copier is super affordable to print the images. But you can see, like,
are those archival prints?
Are they archival? They're sealed archivally. So like technically, I don't know if they're archival, because they're lightweight. They're such lightweight.
I'm sure it's an acid-free paper though.
Yeah.
And with the mediums that create
the mediums protect it. Yeah, the mediums are sealing the imagery and stuff, and they're incredibly hardy. But I like the lack of, like, I like the fuzziness that some of the photos have, and I like that it's not an actual photograph, that there's like a matte sense to it, and that is like extremely, I can be super tough with it. Like I'm really physical and I'm not very tidy. So when it's like a lightweight, like I can really tear it up and not feel like badly about tearing something precious. And that's really important to the elements of my work. Yeah, you can see on the floor, there's like, oh, no, turn around. Okay, we're gonna turn the camera around again. Does that answer the printing questions?
That answers the questions. I see more coming in too. So right now you're in this massive studio space, and you've had a variety of studios over the years.
Yeah.
And can you talk about like how the space affects the work, or how, like, right now you're by yourself, but other times you're in shared buildings, or?
Yeah, my last, well, I was sharing, I had a daughter almost like a year and a half ago. And so, I wanted to move my studio closer to home so I would be able to work more often. And then I started actually physically sharing a space where I only had one wall. But before that, I was in a space that would literally fit like the width of the wall was 12 feet. So it would fit like one collage, you know, and I worked on 3 at the same time. So, and it was like a 12 by 12 space pretty much. So, so I would be really like cramped in, working super tight to these large works. And the works started to be made, like I started making them when actually I did a residency at Mass Mocha. So I'm sure you guys, like most of you probably know Mass Mocha, it's this huge place. So when I went there is when I expanded the collage portrait series to the big pieces about my grandparents. And I had so much space that was inspired by these huge factory style museum spaces that, you know, of course we don't really have in New York, but I didn't really care. So I started building huge things, and then when I came home to my 12 by 12 foot studio, you know, I just kept making the work. It never really impacted me, like the amount of size I have, like, but we'll see what happens here because I haven't spent longer than like a month up here at a time. And this is, I'm already here a month, so, you know, maybe I'll get even bigger. The only problem is in New York is storage, you know, going back to a smaller space. I don't think about that till after, which can often be a problem. You know, I make these big works and then I store them at my parents' house or in storage or, you know, that kind of thing. So, does that answer Charlotte?
I think so. Yeah. And speaking about, you know, you've done such an interesting amount of residencies, and I know you got that big award.
Yeah, I got a Pollock.
Can you speak about some of those and how that's, you know, impacted?
Yeah, I mean, I was a teaching artist for quite a few years and worked, you know, before that worked in restaurants and did all sorts of things to support my work. And I started taking like business coursework on how to run my studio as more of a business, and just like really taking a lot of time to apply for grants and ways of funding my work. And yeah, and slowly, like I started to get smaller ones, but I was a 2018 Pollock Krasner grant recipient, which like really enabled me to just, I mean, it paid for my year to make work. So that, you know, as we know, as artists, is a huge gift. And so it was kind of a slow, you know, sort of full-time transition. About, I think I quit my teaching job in 2014, but with not really much of a plan, and just kind of threw myself into making work and applying for grants. And it took time, but slowly. I think that getting the Pollock Krasner was a big turning point, and like really felt like a large recognition.
It's huge. It's a huge accolade.
For what I was doing. And the residencies also, like every residency I've done has really changed the path of my work. I did one in Switzerland and in Bern that I got funded for by the US Swiss Embassy. And just like going to Switzerland and being able to live there, really, that's where the collage work really started. And then, you know, again, going to Mass Mocha was like taking that collage to the next place. So I always feel like there's these turning points, you know, in my career where the work like continues to evolve. And so up here, and I feel like probably anyone who's like watching who's an artist will feel the same, like this time in is really a crazy time to be an artist. And we're so used to working in isolation anyway. I keep thinking about that, like in this weird way, I have this gift of time because of the world has stopped, you know, so, and I'm lucky to have a lot of help from family and be, you know, isolating with them so I can spend the time on my make work. So like, I feel like this is, you know, can be like another big turning point. But grants have really supported my career. So now, very much so.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And so I know you also, there's a big billboard that happened recently. Can you talk about how that?
Oh yeah, I was selected by ArtBridge, which is a nonprofit arts organization in the city, and they partnered with Google, and they put my work up on the side of the Google building, which was really, really exciting. Yeah, so it was kind of also, all of these are like, there's so much of my job is not just like making the art, but also keeping up with the other stuff, which is making sure that our work gets out into the world. You know, and so the partnership with ArtBridge and Google was really amazing because it was right near the Chelsea market. So, you know, millions of people walk by and see my work. So it was a huge opportunity.
Is it still there?
They took it down right before all of this happened, like in February. So, yeah.
What about the postcard project that you, not the current postcard and not the UPS mail art, but your other postcards?
Yeah, so I do like digital drawings on my phone, you know, because I'm always like, as a New Yorker, we're always commuting, you know, so I was on the train, I was looking for ways to just like do drawings. I started doing these digital drawings, and then I turned some of the more political ones into postcards so that we could write our senators and local representatives. You know, starting in, I think in 2016, I did the first batch after the inauguration. So that's an ongoing series. I thought it's like series of stuff. I think my work has different sort of points, you know, like you can aesthetically see it as all mine, but there's different access points. So I like to like make work that's accessible to everyone. I don't think the large scale pieces are something that is acceptable. I mean, it is like something that everyone would have in their home, but everybody might want a postcard. So I started making these postcards and selling them and giving some proceeds to Planned Parenthood in 2016. And then I started giving them away this year just because I felt like there was more needed, even more so for people to write their reps. So if anyone needs any postcards, let me know.
That's good to know. Thank you. I'm getting a bunch of questions in by the messenger. This is a classic, but did you always want to be an artist? And when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I think like when I was little, I definitely thought about being a pediatrician. The artist, but I've always made art, like since I don't remember not making art from being little. I took my first like oil painting class, and I think when I was in 3rd grade or something, I would go for oil painting lessons.
That's amazing. That's very young to start oil.
It's so awesome.
Good job for your parents getting her in a painting class.
What?
Continue. I said, good job to your parents getting you in a painting class so young.
Go to like the art, like it was my brother's friend's mom, and she was also a teacher, and she taught me how to oil paint. And I still have the oil painting. So from very little, like I always wanted to do art. I think like when I knew it was my job, like my reason for being here was when I was in college, I went to Paris for a study abroad. And I came back from Paris knowing that there was no other choice, that I was an artist. No other options.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it's, I mean, this is something you've touched on a little bit, but just asking very straightforward about how the COVID-19 has changed your approach to making art.
Yeah. I think, well, first, I think about the privilege I have to be able to make work, you know, being home in my apartment for a month and not making work. You know, I feel like the world is in such a crazy place that I get to come to a studio now and make work makes me feel like I need to do something really important. So I just keep thinking that, like, you know, how do I create work that is important? Because there's so much going on in the world and so much like hardship and so many bad things, and I'm so very lucky to have my health and my family and the space. So I think that it's going to push my work in a way that makes sure it's saying something significant. You know, it's not just silly.
That's so beautiful. I feel like you're always fighting for the underdog or the underrepresented in some way through your work. I mean, obviously through the immigration pieces, through the Women's March pieces, and there's this element of the humanness and being able to connect on this larger scale with people and leveling the playing field to an extent of.
Yeah, I mean, I always felt like art should be, you know, something for everyone, you know, and it's like this crazy thing, right? Because to survive as an artist, you have to sell your work, and art isn't something that everyone thinks that they can have on their walls, or they just don't have access to understanding. You know, it comes in a very privileged. There's something privileged about it, even though it's usually made by people who don't have much. You know, it's like this weird thing, but I always feel like it's important to tell these like untold stories to make sure that I don't want to waste anyone's time with my work, you know, if that makes sense. Like I want if you're spending time with me and looking at my imagery, I want you to get something from it too, you know, and I want you to share something with me and for your story to become a part of my story.
We are going to open this up for some more conversation in a few minutes because I see questions are keep coming in. But
Okay.
Here that you could speak pretty directly to is seeking out opportunities as an artist, and how do you find those?
Oh, sure, yeah. I've been working on it for a long time, so I have kind of a routine about it. You know, it's something that I do at least once or twice a week. Is just like straight up do applications, but I use New York Foundation for the Arts as a resource. Are you like, or is the person asking for like literally where I get resources from?
I'm not sure, but yeah, Knife is a great one.
Yeah, and I thought Creative Capital is another great one. I actually use other art, like friends of mine who I've done residencies with have created share documents that are that have deadlines. So it's always great as an artist to rely on your community. You know, I think that there is strength in working with other people. I've definitely like share any opportunities like I've had with people I know and vice versa. And sometimes like if you don't get the grant or you don't get the show, it's exciting to see someone else you know that does get it. You know, it's all part of the same win. So, but New York Foundation for the Arts is a huge one. The database that I started a few years ago that I just keep adding to, and the deadlines mostly stay the same. You know, that's something that I do a lot, but any sort of nonprofit arts organization has really been helpful. And there's a ton of resources now to help artists if anyone needs support during COVID. Like I've received a couple of grants just in the last month because of shared resources. Like follow everyone you can on Instagram and Facebook, and actually it turns into a good resource for finding grants and money and shows and things.
Absolutely. There is
Yeah.
another opportunity that now you're kind of far away from, but you just moved into that other studio on the Lower East Side.
Yeah, I just got a studio residency at PS 122, which is awesome. It's a subsidized studio space, but I got it March 1st, so I haven't really been able to use it much, which is really disappointing. But things like studio residencies, there's actually quite a few if you live within the 5 boroughs. I know, like, if you're a Westchester-based artist, there's a Westchester Arts.
Art Special.
Yeah, they have a ton of resources for Westchester-based artists. But everyone should be able to get some sort of support during COVID. Like, there seems to be a lot of resources at the moment. So, but yeah, so my studio is like not being worked in, which is really crappy, but I couldn't really safely commute and feel like I was keeping my family safe. And so
I hope they extend that or give you some, some kind of understanding has to happen with that. In my personal opinion, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, hopefully. It's like one of those strange situations, which I don't know if any other artists out there have, like if you have a studio. It's sort of like how, like the proposed rent strike that the city keeps talking about, like people were forced to not go to work, like artists are forced to not go to work, but we still have to pay rent, for our studios, which doesn't seem that fair.
Right.
Just like people have to pay rent when they don't have jobs that they want to have. So.
Yeah. Very, very difficult situations.
Yeah, but I'm very lucky because I have this huge space here, so I don't feel, I feel like, okay.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I got a sneak peek of where Kate is and kind of the view outside and everything, and it's rural upstate New York, and she's away from all of it, and that's I'm very jealous. That sounds great, actually. But another thing. I'm so happy you mentioned nonprofit art centers and how they create opportunities for people. And of course, being the Pelham Art Center, we're a local nonprofit art space, but also like thank you to you because you've donated several times to our fall fundraiser for Studio Cafe, where she made some custom 1x1 panels that were available for $250 at our fundraiser, and our spring gala. We've also done live auctions with some of your pieces.
Yeah.
So and that you made a custom Pelham Art Center one 2 years ago. That's just so beautiful and meaningful. And, it's just, thank you so much for that, giving back support.
Yeah, my pleasure. I always feel like nonprofits have really helped me to get, to where I am, especially when you're, and still continue to help me. A lot of my partners are with nonprofit arts organizations. A lot of the places I've shown are nonprofit arts organizations because they show artists that aren't showing at big name galleries. I don't have gallery representation, but I still can have my career because of risks that other places have taken on my work. Like you, Charlotte.
Thank you. Yes, I curated one of Kate's first, was it one of your first solo shows in Chelsea at the Rush Project Space?
My first solo show at Chelsea.
Your first solo show in Chelsea at the Rush Project Space. And she showed some works of that, and it was in response to the mourning and the loss of the grandparents' house. Archived Memories, is that the name of it? Archived Memories. And those pieces, they were 12 by 12 feet, but we had them on all 4 rooms of our project space, which was a 15 by 15 foot room. So when you walked back there, and there was a piece on the floor as well, you really felt like you were within that space. They're kind of all encompassing. Like all of a sudden, I felt like I was standing in your grandparents' kitchen, and then there was an element of the phone, and it was really cool to see that. And that's something like we see that large work in progress behind you, but the scale of these, and when you walk up to them, and then when you start to notice the little painted detail of one piece of it, it's a very cool, it's just very cool, Kate. So well deserved. I'm actually gonna,
Also that piece that was at Rush in the slides that I showed. But it's hard to portray these large works, like, unless you're in person, because part of it, like, so much of it is the scale and then the tiny details that you find. Like, you can't see all the little pictures that are mixed into this big, huge collages until you're up close. Like, and the more time you spend with them, the more you let them kind of encompass you, then the more you see. Because they look different from afar. They look different, like, in a screen. I think that's also something that, like, I've been thinking about. How are we going to adjust to this virtual world? You know, and what mediums will exhibitions take? And so much of my work is like being in person, you know, and so much of what I love about artwork is like seeing it, like the experience you have with being in front of it. You know, I'm not as in love with like looking at a screen. I mean, I'm grateful for things like this where we can share space and time virtually, but I miss like being in person, and it hasn't even been that long yet. But
it hasn't. We're all, you know, hoping for the best, that it won't be this before and after of art openings. We'll see. I don't want to even talk about it. I'll get emotional.
We have to stay present.
Exactly. I think now would be a great time if people wanted to, oh, wait, let me ask this question first. Any quality that you admire most from another artist? Things you admire?
From like just particular artists, I think like the collage style of Mark Bradford. I don't know if people know Mark Bradford's work, but he is a LA-based contemporary artist. He has a very interesting story too, if you don't know, but he works on billboard-sized pieces, also involving layering, kind of much more abstract than my work, even though the piece behind me is looking super abstract as we look at it. But he's like kind of a modern person that I've been inspired by, but a lot of more political-based contemporary artists are also like who I would say inspire me. Classically, like Matisse was like my first love. I remember seeing his retrospective at MoMA when I was in, I don't know, I feel like it was when I was like 13 or something, and these cutouts that he did when he couldn't see anymore. So probably somewhere in there with my collages is my love of Matisse for sure. But a combination of like the old and the new.
That's beautiful. I hadn't thought about your work in relationship with Mark Bradford, but that is a great one. If you don't know the work of Mark Bradford, go check him out. It's a very, very cool stuff. And he's done some stuff with basketball as well. And this is a funny aside that you get, because I'm in conversation with Kate here. Some of the first few times I met Kate, she just kept coming to the events and things at Rush Arts, and she kept coming in, and it was like, oh yeah, I'm an artist and a teacher and a basketball coach. And I was like, oh,
yeah,
really?
Good friends.
Yeah, I was just like, that's a kooky combo, but it worked. So at this time, I know, Lynn, you have a very interesting question. Maybe you want to unmute. I'm going to unspotlight Kate right now too, so that she can see some of the people on the call.
All right. Well, what I noticed was this very explosive quality about your work. It looks like it's all swirling out of this vortex. And I wondered, was that an aesthetic choice, or was that more of a political choice? Like the old way is blown up, you know, or is it?
That's an awesome question. I think it's both, like both aesthetic and also like the chaos. Like this particular piece behind me that I'm working on feels like the chaos of what's going on now, like literally is like exploded. So, but the aesthetics are also a part of it. Like I become interested in the lines that the chairs make and the movement of of it, but also the concept of the chaos is in there. And I can never, I'm not like an artist who has the visualization of how it ends. You know, it's much more presently evolving, if that makes sense. So the work kind of moves. And the tunnel piece that I did was also more represented, like it was the abstraction that I fell in love with, but also at the same time represents the chaos of the city, you know, like this like constant moving and rotation and sort of cyclone and of everything that's going on and the constant change. So it's a combination of both.
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you.
I think your work after the 2016 election, which personally I try to black out, I think as many people do, but Kate, after that, we kind of saw more of that motion and more of that chaos of the city. I think there was a very direct relationship.
Yeah, I think it was like a very direct, like chaotic sort of shift after that. You know, whether I think for me, like it's a conscious and subconscious combination. You know, like the political, like always wanting my work to be political, but at the same time, always being drawn to the material. You know, like so it's both. Like it's you can't separate. I can't really separate my life is all one. You know, there's not like, okay, I'm gonna make work and then go live my life. It's all this. I'm like lucky to have it all be all encompassing. So, and I'm constantly thinking about how to make the world a better place.
That's so beautiful. Beautiful statement, Kate. Does anyone else like to ask a question? You can unmute yourself. You can kind of wave at me. I put myself in gallery view so I could see everyone.
Gallery view too. Or we can just chat about something else if you guys want. It's nice to have people in the studio and not be by myself. I wasn't seeing anyone until now, so I just switched over to seeing everyone. Hi.
Very cool. Oh, I see the baby.
I think Maddie is on, my daughter's on the there. Do you see her?
Oh, there she is. With your mom.
Yeah. She has her Frida Kahlo shirt on. Yeah, so anyone else? Any more questions?
I just want to say hi and we love you and we're so glad you're in the universe.
Oh, wait, is that Megan?
Yeah. Me and Jack.
Hey! I can't see everyone at the same time. It's so nice to see everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Usually everyone's so chatty and everyone's on mute, so everyone's really quiet.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming.
Arlene Rush on the call. Arlene, so nice to see you. Arlene also donated quite a bit of art to nonprofits and been a huge supporter of a lot of endeavors. If you guys don't mind holding on one second, I have a piece of Kate's that I'd like to go grab. I meant to put it in this room with me, but I forgot.
Yeah, we have one here too if you want to see it.
Hi, Judy.
It's so nice to see everybody.
Yeah, there's our. Show them that one too. Hold on, we're going to show you one of our pieces of cake. Can you see it?
Oh, let's see.
There's quite a few of my collectors on the call.
I'm sorry, the light is a little starred reflected.
Wow.
But this is one, Kate made this for me. It's a portrait of me and my husband and my baby. And she mailed this to me as a surprise.
Okay. Yes, Laurie.
In the summer of 2016 when my kid was a little one. And I remember opening this up in the mail and just being blown away. Like, oh my God, it's a Kate Fauvell portrait custom. And I have it in my daughter's room on the wall. And I just love it so much. That actually makes me want to grab one more.
So let's talk amongst ourselves. Thank you everyone for tuning in.
So good to see you.
So good to
It's
see
so good
you,
to see
Kate.
all of you.
That's in your mom's house, that studio.
Yeah, I'm about like 100 feet from my mom's house. There's a separate bar.
Beautiful.
I had to bring out this one too. When I moved out of Brooklyn, Kate gave me this as a housewarming present when I first moved to New Rochelle. And she said, this is so you can have a piece of Brooklyn with you in your home. And now I have it in my suburban life, but
Good. Can you see mine? Can you see the painting? We have a figurative from Kate.
The shadow's kind of bad, Mom.
it's got a bad reflection on it.
Yeah.
I think it's so cool that you also took figure drawing at the Pelham Art Center. Like, that's wild to me.
Yeah.
Lynn, Alexi was her high school art teacher.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh, that's fantastic.
Crazy.
Yeah, really crazy. Really crazy.
There's a little one.
I guess Alexi's not
Oh,
on
that's
this, but I'll
nice.
tell her that.
Beautiful.
Is that any good?
Yeah, oh, that's
Yeah.
nice.
Kate,
Those are
we forgot to
great.
talk about those.
The collage portraits.
Well, you know, wasn't there this big thing with the free trip to Miami?
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah, I won the Bombay Sapphire Art like series and got my work in the Scope Art Fair at Art Basel down in Miami, and it was one of the collage portraits that there.
We have one family one more family one.
That was about 2015, right? Because that like
That was 2015. Yeah, that was 2015.
There's that one.
Yeah.
There's that one. That's good.
Oh, no, keep going.
It's okay, Mom.
Okay, that's it. That's that
thank you
one.
so much. So, does anyone else have some questions, comments they want to share? Feel free.
I just have one more technical question. Do you coat all your pieces with the acrylic medium, or do you just use it to basically anchor it?
Both. I use it to anchor and I seal it. Yeah, and it usually takes a couple of layers of sealing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the pieces become really, really heavy. And I like the sheen that happens. So the large piece behind me doesn't have it yet, but I go through a lot of gloss medium.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the back and the front to make sure, because also I like to use a thin paper. So in order to make sure that it stays like more archival, I like it to be like really solid. And I like the texture that happens with sealing the top. So if you can get it smooth if you seal just the like I like this like roughness happens, which you can't really see so much in the virtual. But if you're up close to my pieces, the surfaces are pretty bumpy and rough, and that's like intentional, like because it's sort of suited to how I am.
Thanks.
Oh, Jane, I see you raising a hand. Make sure you unmute yourself, or I could do it for you.
Okay, hey Kate, I'm Jane Regan. I'm just a student. I take collage at Pelham Art.
Awesome.
I just wanted to watch this and love it because I take collage with Nancy Nicole, which is fun. But my parents both died maybe in the last 10 years, and I have so much of their stuff, old photographs, whatever. I'm hoping to make kind of a legacy project for myself of all their stuff. Not like as big as that, but this has been very inspiring because I've been saving their stuff for this reason, and I want to attach it all: photographs, letters, pieces of letters, parts of things. So thanks. This is really inspiring. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, and it really feels good to give new life to things that would otherwise that have so much value, but like you don't know what to do with them at the same time.
In drawers now, drawers and cabinets, and I want them out in visual, so.
Yeah, you get to make them alive again by making something new.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hey, for doing an ancestral archival piece, do you recommend that you photograph the documents and the old photographs and print them new?
Yeah, I think because I wanted to play with the scale of them too. So
Okay.
I actually did like kind of a even more old school kind of version and Xerox copied them and like enlarged them on a Xerox copy machine. But now, like, you can do it at home. I would say scan it, play with the scale. And then for me, I like them feeling less precious. I felt more pressure with the actual photos.
Yeah.
You know, so I would do like multiple copies in different sizes of the same photos. And then you still get to have the photos, the original photos, and you don't have to worry. You can kind of find the way you want to work with them, which was much more freeing than like feeling like I was going to destroy a piece of my family history. There was too much pressure attached to that.
I love that. I mean, I love that idea. It's something I'm really interested in, and maybe if we're locked down a lot longer,
Yeah,
I can work on it.
Yeah, if we have the time, right? So you can start and just go through those photos and see what happens.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, Arlene. You waving? You gonna unmute? I can't hear you. I'm unmuting you.
Yeah, yes, I muted because in my studio, the noise from the heat came on, and you know, Charlotte, the pipes bang. So I didn't want you guys to have it in the background. So I just want to say bye and thank you so much, and so good to see you both. And
So good to see you, Arlene.
thank you.
So good to see you.
Bye. Love you guys.
Love you.
Love you.
Too. Love.
Is that about our time, Charlotte?
Yeah, we're a few minutes over. It's just, I hate ending these because it's so nice to see everybody. But of course we understand we're at the time. I see Nancy on here too. I don't know if Jane just went off, but it's nice to see our collage teacher here. Paula, you might want to take some classes with Nancy when we figure that out. Thank you so much for joining, everybody. Next week, we're going to visit Christina Nicodema on Tuesday. She's a phenomenal contemporary painter. Next Thursday, we're going to see Dominic Esposito, who's a very interesting activist artist, doing some monumental sculptures at his incredible home studio in Massachusetts. And then on next Friday, we're going to go to San Francisco. So that'll all be good. So stay in touch with what we're doing on our website. These virtual studio visits are so much fun. I feel like I'm hanging out with all of you, and it's great. And Kate, do you have any closing statement you want to?
Thank you to everyone for spending time with me. I feel really honored to have everyone present with me. It's nice to feel not so alone. But thank you for taking time out of your day. It really means a lot. And
Thanks for making our day.
This is where I spend my time when I'm not with that little person in the bottom that you see. I hope everyone can find the time and space and do what they can do while we're in isolation. I'm grateful, for everything and for all of you guys. So thank you.
Love you.
Great job.
Keep creating, everybody.
Thanks.
Keep creating. Appreciate the art in your life.
Bye-bye, Kate.
Thanks, Charlotte.
Bye, Judy. Bye, Charlotte.
Bye, Kate.
Bye.
Bye, Maddie. Bye, Judy.
Bye, Carol.
Bye, Pat. Bye, Rachel. Bye, Rob.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Julie.
Hey,
See you, Rob. James.
Bye, Kate.
Bye, Judy. Bye, Judy. Bye, Jay. Bye, Maddie. Bye, Jane.
I'm gonna end for all.
Bye-bye, Charlotte.